Thank you. Um, a little comment addressed to Joy. We're both Jewish, and my thought was that we Jewish people don't like to camp because we had 40 years of it in the Sinai. We want to go to the Hilton. Well, my story tonight is entitled "Little Bobby and the School Bus." And this story came from my first husband, Bob Scott, telling of what life was like for him in rural Haywood County. He grew up what we would call hard until he left for the Korean conflict in 1951. His family did not have electricity, didn't have a bathroom inside, nor water, nor a telephone. And so I have at putting together a whole series of stories about little Bobby in the school bus. The early September morning was already heating up and steam was rising from the harvested cornfields in Beaver Dam Valley. It was the first day of school, the day after Labor Day, 1938. And little Bobby was nowhere to be found. He had left his family's log home in the gap of Beaver Dam Mountain at dawn that morning. He had hidden out. Now, little Bobby was a little wild thing, and he had the run of the mountains. He preferred the mountain aspects of Beaver Dam and Upper Hominy and northern Haywood County to staying around the home place. It just wasn't for him. He loved everything living and growing, animal, mineral, and vegetable. And he had the intrepid spirit of an explorer. Oftentimes, he would ride his father's mule, John. Now, John was a big, huge, gray, long-eared plowing mule. And then sometimes little Bobby would just leg it on his journeys. But, you know, as he went down the road, the neighbor women would say, "Oh, there goes little Bobby again. I wonder if Ma Jane knows he's busted out." Little Bobby cantered by on the back of Big John, just a little speck, and his legs stuck out to the sides. He was a happy, happy camper. However, this morning, little Bobby was nowhere to be found. Brother Jack was sent running over to Bearwaller Mountain. Now, Bearwaller was the mountain next door, I guess you could say, to Beaver Dam Mountain. And Brother Jack knew that Bobby had lots of little hidey holes on that mountain. Well, he found Bobby in one of those hidey holes. He pulled him out. Oh, Bobby was mad. He was hollering and fighting. And Jack just quick marched him down that mountain to the house for a fast wash up and a change into clean overalls. His mother thrust a poke at him. Now, a poke is like a bag, and it was like a piece of material with a drawstring in the top, and it was used for transporting things everywhere. So Ma Jane thrust this poke at him, and it contained fried side meat between cold cat head biscuits left over from breakfast. And there was an apple in the poke, and it was for his lunch. "Now listen to me, little Bobby," she said. "I want you to behave yourself today and do exactly what the teacher tells you you ought to. And Jack, I'm going to make you responsible for seeing he gets there." Well, Jack put a firm hand on little Bobby's shoulder, and they raced 2 miles down Beaver Dam Mountain to Sutton's store. Now, they fetched up down at the store, and there was already a knot of boys and girls waiting for the bus. Now, the bus was the major reason that little Bobby had taken off because his brothers and sisters had described this conveyance in the most horrifying of analogies. It was a fire-breathing dragon. It was a smoking furnace. It was a mean, big-mouthed monster with a taste for tender little boys. Now, having heard all of this and digested it overnight, little Bobby had decided that he wasn't going to live long enough to get to school. So he determined that he wasn't going to let that monster catch him. Little Bobby, even though he was 6 years old, he's a very canny child, very resourceful, and he had a little plan. With his most winsome and fetching expression, he looked up at Brother Jack and he said, "Do you have a penny?" "Oh, no, you don't," said Jack. For Jack knew that Bobby would disappear into the dim, cool interior of Sutton's store, and then he would scoot right out the back door into the chicken yard. Now, sweeping piglets and hens and goats in front of him, he would rush down to the end of the pen and climb over the back fence. He would beat it back up Beaver Dam and thus on to Bearwaller. Jack knew that he and Bobby would get up switching, and maybe even worse if this happened. So he tightened his grip on little Bobby. And then there it was, chugging and clanking out of a dark, gray, oily screen of smoke. It was huge, black, metal, and it made a horrible grinding sound. Why, it sounded just like the tub mill down on Beaver Dam Creek, where Bobby's family got their corn and flour ground between two immense stones. But this thing, this monster, was even louder and more violent than that was, and it was terrifying. It chugged up to the group of children. It shook and rattled. Bobby thought it was going to jump out at him, and then it came to a shuddering stop with an explosive fart out the pipe that stuck out the rear end. Well, when that happened, little Bobby knew that this was alive, and he was in trouble. Oh, no, 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 no. His mouth popped open. He clapped his hands over his ears. He had never seen or heard or smelled anything like this. It was a stinky contraption. It smelled just like a creosote-crusted chimney, and he didn't want anything of it. He looked at the windows. There were children's faces in the windows, and he thought they were screaming for help. He said, "Oh, no, 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 no." His eyes popped out, and he started to back up. Well, Brother Jack got hold of him and said, "Now listen, little Bobby, we're not doing this. You are going to school. You don't want to be ignorant. Don't do this. Come on now and act right." Little Bobby had no intention of acting right. He started to fight and bite and kick and scratch, and Jack reached out and grabbed him by the galluses of his overalls, was threatening him, and two of the older boys stepped up to grasp little Bobby. At that particular moment, the lips of this thing parted with a smack and flew open with a clang. The mouth of the beast opened wide. Bobby looked up in it, and he saw his friend, Mr. Crocker, the driver of the beast. Mr. Crocker hollered, "Now listen, boys, it's not worth it for you uns to be absent today chasing down this little snot-nosed kid. Just let him go." Well, Bobby gave Mr. Crocker a terrifying look, but also a very thankful look. One final wrench, and he was free from Jack. He dropped his poke in the dirt of the road. He turned tail. He beat it up Beaver Dam, and he did not stop until he got up to the Bear Waller. He skinned up a tall chestnut oak just like he's a little squirrel. He came to rest on a limb next to the trunk, about 20 feet up, and he pressed his shaking, crying, sweaty little cheek into the cool bark of the tree. The words, "We'll send the truant officer after him," rang in his ears, and he hid out in that tree the rest of the morning while keeping one eye boiled for any sight of a truant officer. Now, he didn't know what or who it was, but he knew he wasn't going back to that monster at all. Now, hunger finally drove him down from the tree and home around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Ma Jane found him in her kitchen. He was hooking cold biscuits from the warming shelf on the back of the wood stove. She put her hands on her hips and looked down at her little son. She regarded him with a mixture of anger, frustration, bewilderment, and pity. He looked so dirty, and he was so wild-eyed and so starved. She just didn't have it in her heart to punish him. Little Bobby moped around the yard in the home place the rest of that afternoon. He was thinking of a possible life elsewhere. I mean, he really didn't want to run away from home, but he didn't want to be eaten by that thing either. He also waited and dreaded when Jack got home because he knew Jack was going to romp on him something bad. Later that evening, little Bobby's father rode in on his horse. He had been preaching a sermon at a service over in Madison County. Ma Jane told him about the day and little Bobby's behavior, and little Bobby's daddy just swallowed his laughter as he sought out the little runaway. "Daddy, are you going to strop me?" Tears started to fill his eyes, for he loved his father more than anyone else. "No, son," said Dad. "We're going to have a conversation about school and about that bus." Little Bobby was still crying. He was still pitifully crying, and he said, "Daddy, Mr. Crocker was in the belly of that thing, and I had reckoned him to be a nice man. Please don't make me go back. Please don't make me go back." But his father gathered him up on his knee, and they had a long talk. The next morning, Bobby walked obediently down Beaver Dam Mountain with his siblings, the 2 miles to Sutton's store. He was quaking inside. He was so afraid. But outside, he put on a brave and manly show because that's what he promised his dad he would do. The beast came chugging and clanking up again. The mouth flung open with a clang. Little Bobby mounted the steep steps into the belly of the monster. He nodded at Mr. Crocker, walked down the longest aisle in the world, and took a seat at the back window. The beast slowly started up, moving forward. Little Bobby looked out the back window, and he saw his magical and carefree babyhood on the mountain disappear into a black, oily cloud of smoke.